The man you just married will be dead in 72 hours. That was the first thing Lily Carter heard after signing the contract, the ink barely dry, her hands still trembling as the lawyer slid the papers away without meeting her eyes. No congratulations, no smiles, just silence thick enough to feel like pressure in her chest. And now she stood at the top of a winding staircase inside a mansion that didn't feel like a home. It felt like something older, colder, like the walls themselves were watching her, her worn heels echoing softly against polished marble as she followed a servant who never once looked back. The air smelled faintly metallic and clean, too clean, like a hospital room sealed away from the world. Except this place was too grand, too dark, every shadow stretching longer than it should, every light dimmed as if the house itself rejected warmth. Lily pulled her thin coat tighter around her shoulders. It was barely 40 degrees outside, but inside felt colder, unnatural. She told herself this was temporary, just 3 days, that was the deal. Marry the dying man, stay until he passed, and in return, her debts would disappear, her life reset. It was supposed to be simple, transactional, nothing more, but nothing about this felt simple. The servant stopped at a tall door carved with intricate patterns that looked almost like symbols, not decorative, deliberate. He opened it without a word and stepped aside. Lily hesitated, her pulse quickening, then stepped inside. The room was vast, the ceiling at least 20 feet high, heavy curtains drawn tight, blocking out any trace of the outside world, and at the center, a bed, too large, too still, and on it, Victor Hale, the man she had just married. He looked wrong, not in a way she could explain at first, just wrong. His skin was pale, not sickly, but almost flawless, like carved stone, his dark hair perfectly still against the pillow, his chest unmoving. Not shallow breaths, not weak breaths, nothing. Lily swallowed hard. This wasn't what she expected. She had seen sick before, hospitals, machines, the slow fading of life. This was different. This was silence, complete and absolute. Like time had stopped around him. She took a step closer, then another, the sound of her heartbeat loud in her ears. Hi. Her voice came out softer than she intended, almost swallowed by the room. No response. Of course not. She told herself again. Dying man, 72 hours. That was all. She moved to the edge of the bed, her fingers hovering uncertainly before finally resting against his hand. And the cold hit her instantly. Not the chill of someone ill, but something deeper, like touching winter itself. Lily flinched but didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned slightly closer, whispering, I'm here. The words felt strange, unnecessary, but she said them anyway. And for a moment, nothing happened. Just silence. Just that heavy stillness pressing in from all sides. Then suddenly, beneath her fingertips, something moved. A single pulse, sharp and undeniable. Lily froze, her breath catching as she felt it again, stronger this time. A rhythm where there had been none. Her eyes snapped to his face just as his chest rose in a slow, deliberate breath, not weak, not fading. Controlled. And then his eyes opened, deep crimson cutting through the dim light, locking onto hers with an intensity that made the air feel like it had been pulled from the room. Lily stumbled back, her hand slipping from his as the temperature seemed to drop even further, shadows shifting along the walls as if reacting to him, as if the entire room had been waiting for this exact moment. Victor Hale sat up in one fluid motion, not like someone recovering, but like someone awakening. And when he spoke, his voice was low, steady, and far too aware for a man who was supposed to be dying. Who? He said slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. Gave you the right to wake me. The question hung in the air like a command that did not expect an answer, and Lily Carter felt her throat tighten as Victor Hale's crimson eyes held hers with impossible focus, not confused, not weak, but fully aware, fully present. I did not mean to, she said, her voice unsteady despite her effort to remain calm. They told me you were dying. A flicker of something crossed his expression, not pain, not surprise. Something older, sharper, as if the word itself meant nothing to him. He rose from the bed slowly, every movement controlled, deliberate, as though he was testing the world again after a long absence. The air shifted with him, the cold deepening, pressing against her skin. Dying. he repeated. Quietly, tasting the word like it did not belong, his gaze moved over her, taking in every detail, her worn coat, her trembling hands, the uncertainty she could not hide. And yet you stand here, he said, stepping closer, the distance between them shrinking until she could feel that unnatural chill radiating from him. Very much alive. Lily took a small step back without realizing it, her mind racing. Nothing about this made sense, not the contract, not this man, not the way the room seemed. To respond to him, I signed the papers, she said quickly, as if explaining would ground her in something real. They said if I stayed for 3 days, everything would be taken care of, my debts, my life. I did not know anything else. His eyes narrowed slightly at that, not in anger, but in calculation, as if every word she spoke was being weighed against something unseen. You signed. He echoed, softer now, and then his gaze shifted, not to her, but to her hand. Lily followed his eyes, and that was when she saw it, a faint glow beneath her skin, just above her wrist, a mark that had not been there before, intricate, delicate, like something carved in light. It pulsed once, slow and steady, and her breath caught. What is that? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Victor's expression changed then, something tightening beneath the surface, recognition, and something else she could not name. That, he said quietly, is not supposed to exist. Before she could respond, the heavy doors behind her opened without warning. The sound sharpened the stillness, and suddenly the room was no longer empty. Figures entered, dressed in dark, tailored coats that seemed to absorb the dim light. Their presence precise, controlled, but unmistakably powerful. Lily turned, her pulse spiking as their attention locked onto her. Not curious, not confused, but focused. My lord, one of them said, his voice respectful but edged with tension, his eyes flicking briefly to Lily's glowing wrist before returning to Victor. You have awakened. Victor did not look away from Lily. Clearly, he replied, his tone calm. But there was something beneath it now, something colder. The man hesitated, then stepped forward slightly. The council must be informed immediately. His gaze shifted again, lingering on Lily. And the human, she should not be here. The word human landed differently. This time, heavier, like a line being drawn. Lily's chest tightened, but before she could speak, Victor moved, not fast, not sudden, just one step. But it was enough. He placed himself between her and the others without even looking back, a silent barrier that changed the entire room. She stays, he said, and there was no hesitation in it, no room for argument. The others exchanged brief glances, something unspoken passing between them. My lord, another voice spoke, quieter, more cautious. If the mark is real, then this is not a coincidence. Lily's fingers curled instinctively over her wrist, trying to hide the faint glow, but it pulsed again, stronger this time, as if reacting to the attention. There is no such thing as coincidence, Victor said, finally turning his head slightly, his profile sharp against the dim light. Not after 1,000 years. The room fell silent at that, the weight of his words settling over them all. Lily felt her heartbeat quicken. 1,000 years. The number echoed in her mind. Too large, too impossible. What did I sign? She asked, her voice steadier now despite the fear threading through it. Victor turned back to her fully then, his crimson gaze locking onto hers with an intensity that made everything else fade. You signed, he said slowly, each word deliberate. A contract that should have remained buried. He stepped closer again, close enough that she could see the faint shift of something ancient behind his eyes, and now, his voice lowered, almost a murmur. It has chosen to remember you. Lily's breath caught as the mark on her wrist flared brighter, no longer faint, no longer subtle. And for the first time, she realized this was not something that could be undone, not something that could be explained away. Whatever this was, whatever she had stepped into, it had already begun to claim her. The glow on Lily Carter's wrist did not fade this time. It spread, thin lines of light tracing upward like veins of something alive beneath her skin, pulsing in a rhythm that did not match her heartbeat. And the moment it brightened, the entire room seemed to react, the air tightening, the shadows along the walls stretching just slightly further, as if something unseen had been awakened along with him. Lily tried to step back, but found herself unable to look away from it. "Make it stop," she whispered, her voice unsteady as she pressed her other hand over the mark. But the warmth only intensified beneath her palm, not burning, not painful, but undeniable, real. Victor watched her closely, his expression unreadable, but his focus absolute, as if every reaction she had mattered more than anything else in the room. "It will not harm you," he said, his voice low, controlled. Yet there was a tension beneath it now, something restrained, something watching carefully. "Then why does it feel like it is waking up?" Lily asked, her breath quickening as the light pulsed again, stronger. Victor did not answer immediately, and that silence said more than words could. Behind him, the others shifted, their composure precise but not untouched. "My lord." One of them spoke again, quieter this time. "The sigil is stabilizing." Lily's head snapped up at that word, sigil. The way they said it made it sound like something ancient, something that did not belong to her world. "You knew about this," she said, her voice sharper now as she looked at Victor, not pleading, not confused, but demanding something real. "You all knew what this was." Victor's gaze did not waver, but something in his posture shifted, almost imperceptibly, as if the weight of that truth had been there long before she arrived. "I knew of the possibility," he said finally, each word measured, but not the certainty. Lily let out a small, disbelieving breath. "So I was just what a risk you were willing to take?" she asked, her voice tightening despite her effort to stay steady. "A name on a contract you did not think would matter." The room fell silent again, not because of what she said, but because of how she said it, the quiet strength beneath her fear, the refusal to shrink. Victor studied her for a long moment, longer than was comfortable, longer than felt necessary. And then something unexpected happened. His expression softened, not completely, not enough to erase the edge of something ancient behind it, but enough to shift the air between them. "If you were a risk," he said quietly, "you would not be standing here." Lily frowned slightly, confused by the answer, but before she could respond, the mark flared again, brighter than before, and this time the reaction was immediate. One of the figures stepped forward sharply. "Is accelerating," he said, his voice no longer neutral. "That should not be possible without the full right." Victor's attention snapped to Lily's wrist, his focus narrowing, intense. "What did you say to me?" he asked suddenly, his voice sharper now. Lily blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "Before I woke," he clarified, stepping closer again, his presence overwhelming the space between them. "You said something," Lily swallowed, her mind racing back through the moment. The silence, the cold, the stillness. "I just said I was here," she answered slowly, unsure why it mattered. Victor's gaze darkened slightly, not in anger, but in realization, something clicking into place that had been missing before. "Say it again," he said, softer now, but no less commanding. Lily hesitated, her eyes flicking briefly to the others in the room before returning to him. "I said, I am here." The moment the words left her lips, the mark responded, the light surging in a steady wave that spread further along her wrist. No longer faint lines, but something structured, deliberate, forming patterns that looked almost like writing. The room went completely still. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the air seemed to pause. Victor exhaled slowly, a sound that carried more weight than it should have. "It recognizes you," he said, almost to himself. Lily's chest tightened. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice quieter now, not because she was less afraid, but because something deeper had taken hold, something she could not explain. Victor lifted his gaze back to hers, and this time there was no distance in it, no detachment, only certainty. "It means," he said slowly, "this contract was never meant to bind just anyone." Lily felt her heartbeat stumble as the implications settled in, heavy and unavoidable. "Then who was it meant for?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Victor held her gaze for a long moment before answering, his voice low, steady, and impossible to ignore. "Someone it would recognize." The mark pulsed again, brighter than ever, and for the first time, Lily realized this was not something that had just happened to her. This was something that had been waiting, and somehow, impossibly, it had been waiting for her all along. The light did not stop growing. It settled into her skin like it had finally found where it belonged, the lines no longer flickering but steady, deliberate, forming a pattern that felt older than anything Lily Carter had ever known. She lowered her hand slowly, no longer trying to hide it because something in her told her it would not matter. They had all seen it, and more importantly, it had already seen them. The room remained silent, but it was no longer the same silence as before. This one was heavier, charged with realization, with consequences. Victor Hale did not move for a moment, his gaze fixed on the mark as if confirming something that had only ever existed in theory. It has completed the first seal, one of the figures said quietly, his voice no longer uncertain but controlled in a different way, like someone acknowledging a shift they could not undo. Lily's chest tightened. First seal, she repeated, the words unfamiliar but carrying weight. Victor finally lifted his eyes to meet hers again, and this time there was no distance left between them, no cold indifference, only focus. A contract like this does not bind all at once, he said, his tone calm but unyielding. It unfolds. Lily shook her head slightly, trying to process what he was saying. I did not agree to anything unfolding, she replied, her voice firm despite the unease creeping in. I signed papers, that is all. A faint, almost imperceptible shift crossed Victor's expression, not amusement, not disbelief, but something closer to recognition. Paper, he said quietly, as if the concept itself was insignificant, is only a reflection of something older. Lily's fingers curled slightly at her side, the warmth from the mark still present, still steady. Then tell me what this actually is, she demanded, not louder, not aggressive, but clear, and for a moment, no one else spoke, no one interrupted. Even the others seemed to wait for his answer. Victor stepped closer again, not threatening, not forceful, but intentional, his presence filling the space without effort. It is a binding, he said, one that ties your existence to mine, not for days, not for months, but for as long as it endures. Lily's breath caught despite herself, the words settling in deeper than she wanted them to. That is not possible, she said quickly, almost reflexively. Nothing lasts that long. Victor's gaze did not soften, but something in it sharpened. You are standing in a place built before your country existed, he said evenly. And you are questioning time. The weight of that statement pressed against her, quiet but undeniable. Lily looked down at her wrist again, the mark steady, unchanging now, as if it had decided its place. What happens next? She asked, her voice quieter, not because she was giving in, but because she needed to understand. Victor did not answer immediately, his attention shifting briefly to the others in the room, a silent exchange passing between them, something unspoken but acknowledged. Then he turned back to her. Now, he said slowly, the contract begins to recognize you. Lily frowned slightly. It already has, she said, lifting her wrist slightly. Victor shook his head once, a small, precise motion. That was only the beginning, he replied. Recognition is not acceptance. The distinction settled heavily, and before she could ask what that meant, the mark pulsed again, not brighter, but deeper, and with it came something new, not pain, not fear, but a sensation she could not name, like something inside her had shifted, like a door she did not know existed had just been opened. Lily inhaled sharply, her balance faltering for a brief second before steadying. Victor noticed instantly, his focus sharpening. What is it? He asked, not commanding this time, but direct. Lily hesitated, searching for words that did not exist. It feels like, she started, then stopped, unsure, like something is watching back. The room went still again, but this time it was different, heavier, as if her words had confirmed something no one wanted to say aloud. Victor's expression darkened slightly, not with anger, but with certainty. It is not watching, he said quietly. It is remembering. Lily's heart skipped. Remembering what? She asked, her voice barely steady now. Victor held her gaze, and for the first time, there was something in his eyes that felt almost human, something that had nothing to do with power or control. You, he said simply, and that single word changed everything, because it meant this was not random, not accidental, not a mistake. It meant whatever this contract was, whatever this bond had become, it had always been meant to find her, and now that it had, there was no clear way back. The word lingered between them, simple yet impossible to ignore, and Lily Carter felt it settle somewhere deeper than fear, deeper than confusion, as if it had found a place inside her that had been waiting without her knowing. She shook her head slowly, trying to push it away. "That does not make sense," she said, her voice quieter now, but still holding on to reason. "You are talking like this thing knows me, like it has seen me before. That is not possible." Victor Hale did not argue, did not correct her immediately. He only watched her, and that silence again felt deliberate, measured, as if he was deciding how much truth she was ready to hear. "It does not know you as you are now," he said finally, his voice low, steady. "It knows what you carry." Lily's brow tightened slightly. "I do not carry anything," she replied, almost instinctively. But even as she said it, the mark on her wrist pulsed again, not brighter, but deeper, as if responding to the denial itself. Victor's gaze dropped briefly to it, then returned to her eyes. "You do," he said. "You simply have not been aware of it." The others in the room shifted subtly, their attention, never leaving her, not hostile, not welcoming, but watchful, like observers witnessing something rare, something that had not happened in a very long time. Lily exhaled slowly, forcing herself to stay grounded. "Then explain it to me," she said, her tone more controlled now. "Explain what I am supposed to be carrying that binds me to something like this." Victor took a step back this time, creating a small distance between them, not to separate, but to think, to consider, long before contracts were written in ink, he began, his voice taking on a quieter weight. They were written in bloodlines, in promises that outlived those who made them. Lily listened despite herself, every instinct telling her this was impossible, and yet nothing in this room allowed her to dismiss it. "Some of those promises were never fulfilled," he continued. "They remained waiting." Lily's fingers tightened slightly at her side. "Waiting for what?" she asked. Victor's gaze held hers, unwavering. "For the one they were meant for." The answer landed heavily, too direct, too certain, and Lily felt something shift again, not in the room, but inside her, like a memory she could not access pressing just beneath the surface. "You are saying this was always meant to happen," she said slowly. Victor did not hesitate this time. "Yes." Lily let out a small breath, almost a laugh, but without humor. "Then why me?" she asked, not angrily, not pleading, but genuinely searching for something real. Victor studied her again, longer this time, as if the answer was not simple, as if it was something even he was still uncovering. "That," he said quietly, "is what the contract will reveal." The uncertainty in that answer did not bring comfort, but it was honest. And somehow that mattered more than anything else he could have said. The mark pulsed again, and this time the sensation was clearer, not just warmth, not just presence, but something like awareness, like a quiet voice that did not use words but still existed. Lily inhaled sharply, her balance shifting for a brief second before steadying again. Victor stepped forward instantly, not touching her, but close enough to anchor her without force. "It is reacting faster than it should," one of the others said under his breath. Victor did not look away from Lily. "Then we do not have time," he replied calmly. Lily's eyes snapped to his. "Time for what?" she asked, her voice tightening again. Victor held her gaze, and for the first time, there was no distance, no hesitation, only certainty. "For you to decide whether you will fight what this is," he said, "or become it." The words settled heavily, leaving no space between them. No illusion of control. Lily felt her heart race, not from fear alone, but from the weight of what he was asking, what he was implying. "And if I choose neither," she said quietly. Victor's expression did not change, but his answer came without pause. "Then it will choose for you." The mark pulsed once more, deeper than before, and this time, Lily understood something she had been avoiding since the moment she walked into this place. This was never about a contract she could walk away from. It was about something that had already begun, something that was no longer asking for permission. And as she stood there, caught between a life she understood and something far beyond it, she realized the most unsettling truth of all. A part of her was no longer afraid of what she was becoming. It was beginning to feel like something she had always been waiting to remember. The choice lingered in the air long after the words were spoken, and Lily Carter felt it settle into her chest like something real, something unavoidable, not a question, not a suggestion, but a turning point that had already begun without her consent. She drew in a slow breath, trying to steady herself, but the world around her no longer felt stable. The room, the people, even her own body felt slightly misaligned, as if she had stepped half a pace out of the life she used to know. "I do not even know what I would be choosing," she said finally, her voice quieter now, not weak, but grounded in something more honest than fear. Victor Hale did not move, but his attention sharpened, as if this answer mattered more than anything else she had said. "Then you begin by understanding," he replied, his tone steady, and for the first time, there was no edge to it, no cold authority, only clarity. Lily exhaled slowly, her gaze dropping briefly to the mark on her wrist. It no longer felt foreign, not entirely. The warmth had settled into something constant, something present, like a second heartbeat that did not belong to her, but did not feel separate either. "And if understanding changes nothing?" she asked, lifting her eyes back to his. Victor's expression did not shift, but his answer came without hesitation. "It already has." The certainty in his voice made it impossible to ignore, and Lily felt it again, that subtle shift inside her, like something aligning, something that had been waiting for permission she had not realized she was giving. The others in the room remained silent, but their presence was no longer distant. It pressed in, watching, waiting, not for her to fail, but for something to reveal itself. "What happens next?" she asked again. But this time the question was different, not driven by confusion, but by awareness. Victor stepped back slightly, giving her space, not out of distance, but intention. "You do not stay here," he said, his voice returning to that calm authority. "This room was never meant to hold what has begun." Lily glanced around. The heavy walls, the drawn curtains, the stillness that had felt suffocating only moments ago now seemed smaller, contained. "Then where?" she asked. Victor turned slightly, his gaze shifting toward the tall doors, where the contract was meant to unfold. He replied, and something in the way he said it made the answer feel larger than a place, larger than distance. The doors opened again without a word, the figures stepping aside this time, not blocking her path, but clearing it. Lily hesitated for only a second before moving, her steps slower now, not from fear, but from the weight of what she was stepping into. Victor followed beside her, not leading, not pulling, just present. And somehow that presence steadied her more than anything else in the room. The hallway beyond was darker, longer than it should have been, the air cooler, quieter, each step echoing softly as if the space itself was aware of them passing through it. Lily felt the mark pulse again, softer this time, not demanding, but guiding, and without thinking, she slowed, her gaze shifting down the corridor. "This way," she said quietly, the words leaving her before she had time to question them. Victor stopped beside her, his eyes narrowing slightly, not in doubt, but in recognition. "You feel it," he said. Lily nodded, slowly, unsure how to explain it. "It is not a thought," she said, her voice low, almost distant. "It is just there." The others exchanged glances behind them, subtle but noticeable. Victor turned back toward the direction she had indicated, his expression settling into something resolved. "Then we follow it," he said simply, and that was it. No debate, no hesitation. As if her instinct now held equal weight to his command, Lily took another step forward, then another, the corridor stretching. Ahead, shadows shifting along the walls as if responding to her presence. Not threatening, not hostile, but aware, and with each step, the feeling inside her grew clearer, stronger, not overwhelming, but undeniable, like something ancient stirring just beneath the surface of who she was. And as she walked deeper into a place she had never seen, guided by something she could not name, Lily realized the choice she had been given was already fading, because whatever this was, whatever she was becoming, it was no longer waiting for her to decide. It was already leading her forward. The corridor seemed endless, stretching far beyond what the mansion's exterior could ever contain, and with each step Lily Carter took, the world behind her felt further away, quieter, less real. the faint echo of her footsteps blending with something deeper, something that did not come from the stone beneath her feet, but from within her. The mark on her wrist pulsed again, steady and certain, no longer asking, no longer reacting, but guiding, and she followed without hesitation now, her movements slower but more deliberate, as if she trusted something she could not yet understand. Victor Hale walked beside her, silent, his presence unwavering, not interrupting, not questioning, but watching closely, observing every shift in her expression, every subtle change in her breath, as if the smallest detail mattered. "It is changing," one of the figures behind them said quietly, his voice low but unable to hide the tension beneath it. The response is too precise. Lily heard the words but did not turn, did not slow, because the feeling pulling her forward was stronger than anything behind her. It was no longer just a direction, it was a certainty, and as they moved deeper, the corridor began to change, the walls narrowing slightly, the air growing colder, not empty cold, but something heavier, something filled with presence, ancient and patient, like a place that had been waiting for this exact moment. Lily's fingers brushed lightly against the wall as she walked, and for a brief second, the mark on her wrist flared, not painfully, but with recognition, and the stone beneath her fingertips felt warm in response, as if it knew her, as if it had always known her. She pulled her hand back slowly, her breath catching. "This place," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "It feels like it remembers me." Victor's gaze shifted to her immediately, his expression tightening just slightly, not with doubt, but with confirmation. "It does," he said, his voice quieter now, more measured. "This part of the estate was sealed long before the modern world existed. It was never meant to be entered again." Lily slowed her steps slightly at that, not from fear, but from the weight of what that meant. "Then why is it opening now?" she asked, her voice steady despite the question. Victor did not answer right away, and that silence again carried meaning. Before he could speak, the corridor ended, not gradually, but suddenly, opening into a vast chamber that seemed untouched by time, the ceiling rising high above, shadows lingering in the corners like something alive but unmoving, and at the center of it all stood a structure, circular, carved from dark stone, etched with the same patterns that now glowed faintly along Lily's wrist. Her steps slowed to a stop as she took it in, her breath shallow, not from fear, but from recognition she could not explain. "I have seen this before," she said softly, her voice barely audible. Victor's attention sharpened instantly. "That is not possible," one of the others said behind them, his tone controlled but strained. Lily did not look back, her eyes fixed on the structure as the mark on her wrist pulsed again, stronger. This time, and without thinking, she stepped forward, one step, then another, drawn toward it by something deeper than logic. Victor moved with her, closer now, his presence more focused, as if he understood the importance of what was happening even if he could not fully predict it. "Do not rush this," he said quietly, not as a command, but as caution. Lily nodded slightly, though her body continued forward, as if the decision had already been made somewhere beyond her control. The air in the chamber shifted as she approached, growing still, heavy, as if everything within it was holding its breath, and then she reached the edge of the circle, the markings on the stone glowing faintly now, mirroring the pattern on her skin. Her hand lifted slowly, almost instinctively, hovering just above the surface, and for a moment, everything paused, time, breath, thought. Then her fingers touched the stone, and the reaction was immediate, not explosive, not violent, but absolute. The light surged outward from the point of contact, flowing through the carvings like something awakening, something that had been dormant for far too long. Lily's eyes widened, not in fear, but in realization, as something deep within her responded in kind, a memory not of images, not of words, but of feeling, ancient and familiar, rising to meet the moment. Victor stepped closer, his voice lower now, carrying a weight that had not been there before. "You were not brought here," he said, watching her, with a focus that left no room for doubt. "You returned." And as the light continued to spread beneath her hand, illuminating the entire chamber in a soft, steady glow, Lily realized that whatever this place was, whatever this bond had become, It was not just something she had entered. It was something she had belonged to long before she ever knew her own. Name the moment her fingers touched the stone. The chamber responded as if it had been waiting for centuries for that exact contact. The light did not flash or explode. It flowed, smooth and controlled, spreading outward in perfect symmetry, filling every carved line with a soft glow that pulsed in rhythm with the mark on Lily Carter's wrist. And for a brief second, she forgot to breathe, not out of fear, but because something inside her had shifted into place, something that felt less like change and more like recognition. Her hand remained against the surface, not forced, not held, but connected, as if the boundary between her and the stone no longer existed. Victor Hale stood just behind her now, closer than before, his presence steady, watchful. But there was something different in him as well, something quieter, as if even he understood that this moment did not belong to him. It belonged to her. "It is accepting you," he said, his voice low, almost reverent, and the words carried a weight that settled deep into the chamber. Lily's eyes traced the glowing patterns spreading beneath her hand, following the lines as they moved outward, forming shapes that felt both foreign and familiar at the same time. "No," she said softly, almost to herself. "It is not accepting me." Victor's gaze sharpened slightly at that. "Then what is it doing?" he asked. Lily's breath slowed, her focus deepening as the sensation inside her grew clearer, stronger, no longer distant or abstract but present, undeniable. "It is recognizing me," she said, and the difference between those two words changed everything. The figures behind them shifted again, their composure holding but their attention fully locked onto her now. One of them stepped forward slightly, unable to remain silent any longer. "My lord, if this continues, the full seal will activate." Victor did not look back. His eyes remained fixed on Lily. "Then we observe," he replied calmly, but there was a tension beneath his control now, something that had not been there before, because this was no longer theory, no longer possibility. It was happening, and none of them truly knew what would come next. The light spread further, reaching the edges of the circular structure, then beyond, climbing the walls of the chamber in slow, deliberate lines, illuminating carvings that had not been visible before, symbols layered upon symbols, telling a story that had been hidden in darkness for too long. Lily felt her chest tighten as something deeper stirred within her. Not pain, not fear, but memory. Not clear images, not voices, but impressions, fragments of something ancient brushing against her consciousness. She closed her eyes briefly, her hand still resting against the stone, and for a moment, the world around her faded, replaced by a sensation of standing somewhere else, somewhere vast, somewhere filled with the same presence she felt now. "You feel it," Victor said quietly, not asking, but confirming. Lily opened her eyes slowly, her gaze distant but steady. "It is not just a place," she said, her voice softer, more certain. "It is a promise." The words settled into the chamber like something final, something undeniable, and the reaction was immediate. The lights surged again, not violently, but with purpose. The patterns on the stone shifting slightly, aligning into something more complete, more defined. And the mark on her wrist responded in kind, its glow deepening, its lines extending further up her arm in a slow, deliberate movement. Victor's expression changed then, not with fear, but with realization. "The second seal," he said under his breath, the words barely audible, but carrying weight. Lily felt it too. The shift, the progression, like something moving forward that could not be stopped. She pulled her hand back suddenly, not out of panic, but instinct, and the light did not disappear. It remained, steady and alive, as if her touch had only been the beginning. "What happens when it finishes?" she asked, turning to Victor now, her voice steady despite the question. Victor met her gaze without hesitation, and for the first time, there was no distance between them, no barrier of power or control, only truth. "Then the contract becomes absolute," he said. Lily held his gaze, the weight of those words settling in. "And what does that make me?" she asked, not quietly, not uncertainly, but with clarity. Victor did not look away, his answer immediate, unshaken. "Not what you were," he said, and that was all. But it was enough, because as the light continued to glow around them, As the chamber awakened fully for the first time in centuries, Lily understood something she had been resisting since the beginning. This was not a transformation being forced upon her. It was something she was stepping into, something that had been waiting. And as the mark on her arm pulsed again, stronger than ever, she realized the most unsettling truth of all. She was no longer trying to stop it. The chamber did not dim when she pulled her hand away. It remained alive with light, steady and unwavering, as if her touch had not triggered it, but restored it. And Lily Carter stood at the center of it all, her breath slow, her mind no longer racing, but settling into something unfamiliar, something deeper than fear. The mark along her arm no longer pulsed unpredictably. It moved with purpose now, its lines extending further, forming a complete pattern that felt less like something foreign and more like something remembered. Victor Hale did not speak immediately, and that silence held weight, not uncertainty, but recognition of a moment that could not be interrupted. The others in the chamber remained still, their presence no longer pressing but contained, as if even they understood that whatever was happening now did not belong to them. Lily lowered her gaze to her arm, watching as the final lines of the mark settled into place, the glow softening but not fading, becoming part of her rather than something on her. She flexed her fingers slowly, testing the feeling, expecting resistance, expecting something unnatural, but instead there was only clarity, a quiet sense of alignment she had never known before. "It is done," one of the figures said softly behind her, not in alarm, not in fear, but in acknowledgement. Victor stepped forward then, closing the space between them, his gaze fixed on her, not the mark, not the chamber, but her. And there was something different in his expression now, something that had not been there before, not control, not calculation, but something closer to respect. "No," Lily said quietly before he could speak, her voice steady, certain in a way it had not been before. She lifted her eyes to meet his, and for the first time, there was no hesitation in her gaze. "It is not done." Victor's expression shifted slightly, not in disagreement, but in interest. "Then what is it?" he asked, his voice lower now, not commanding, but listening. Lily took a slow breath, the air in the chamber feeling different, lighter, as if the space itself had changed now that something long awaited had finally completed its first purpose. "It is beginning," she said, and the truth of those words settled into the room like something undeniable. The light around them did not fade. It stabilized, the patterns along the walls no longer shifting but holding their form, complete and awake. Victor studied her for a long moment, as if seeing her not as she had been when she entered, but as something entirely new, something that stood equal within a world that had never allowed it before. "Then you understand what you are now," he said, not as a question, but as a statement. Lily did not answer immediately, her gaze drifting briefly around the chamber, taking in the space that no longer felt foreign, no longer felt distant, but familiar in a way she could not fully explain. "I understand enough," she said finally, her voice calm, grounded. "Enough to know I was never meant to walk away from this." Victor's eyes held hers, and for a brief moment, something unspoken passed between them, not control, not ownership, but recognition, mutual and absolute. The others shifted again, their composure returning, but their silence now carried something different, not observation, but acceptance. One of them stepped forward slightly, his voice measured. "My lord, if the second seal has stabilized, then the final phase will follow." Lily's attention returned to Victor at that, her expression unchanged but her focus sharp. "Final phase," she repeated. Victor did not look away from her. "The part where the contract no longer waits," he said, his voice steady. "It will begin to shape the world around it." Lily felt the weight of that, not as pressure, but as inevitability. She looked down at her hand once more, the faint glow still present beneath her skin, no longer separate, no longer something she could remove. And then she lifted her gaze again, not to the chamber, not to the others, but to him. "Then it will not be just your world anymore," she said, and there was no challenge in her tone, no defiance, only truth. Victor held her gaze, and for the first time, there was no distance left at all, no difference in height, in power, in presence. Only two forces standing at the same point of something far larger than either of them alone. No, he said quietly. It will not. The chamber fell silent again, but this time it was not heavy, not waiting. It was settled, complete in a way it had not been before. And as Lily stood there, no longer lost, no longer uncertain, she realized the final truth that had been building since the moment she stepped into that mansion. She had not married into a world she did not belong to. She had returned to one that had been waiting for her to take her place. And somewhere beyond the chamber, beyond the walls of the estate, something vast had already begun to shift. In response, not because it was commanded, but because it recognized that its queen had finally awakened.